Okay, Vice Chair and Directors, the first item on your workshop agenda is the Hidalgo County Regional Director Cantu.
Hello?
Yes, Director Cantu, this is Pilar. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're just about to start the workshop, sir. Okay, so the first item on the workshop, item number one, is the Hidalgo County Regional Mobility Authority Board of Directors Annual Ethics and Compliance Training. And so this is the annual training for the Board of Directors and the staff. And Ms. Blakely Fernandez will be conducting the training as she does every year.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Becky.
More training for the rest of you, huh?
Really, that's all we need, right? At our age. Yeah.
Okay, so as Pilar mentioned, tonight we're doing our annual 2021 Ethics and Compliance Training. This is part of TxDOT's requirements for RMAs. And the training is part of the internal ethics and compliance program that the RMA has adopted. So as a quick refresher, ethics is the what, the conduct and the behavior, and compliance is the how. That's the evidence and the enforcement. We're going to cover the 7 key areas outlined here on this list. If you've sat on a state or local board or commission, you may be familiar already with some of the state laws. TxDOT in many cases provides more stringent guidelines, and in some instances, the RMA has adopted additional rules. And so I'll highlight those when those are applicable. And we'll start with conflict of interest. Under state law, a board member shall not participate in a vote on a matter related to a business entity or property in which the board member has a substantial business or property interest and would receive economic benefit. But what I really want to highlight with this requirement is how low the thresholds are. So for a business interest, you're looking at a trigger of with 10% ownership, 10% of your income, or $15,000 in fair market value. A property interest can be triggered with a value of $2,500. In addition to the state conflict rules, the transportation code and TxDOT rules expand this obligation. And as you read through the rules that I've got listed here, what I want to highlight is the standard. And you'll see in blue, the language might influence, could impair independence, could create a conflict. The standard that the transportation code and TxDOT have adopted for RMA board members is really about perception and requires much more caution than you might otherwise apply. There are some conflicts that the legislature and TxDOT have determined are so significant that they negate a director's ability to serve. A director may not be employed, manage, own, or control an entity that's regulated or receives funds from TxDOT, the RMA, or the county, or that uses a substantial amount of goods, services, or funds from TxDOT, the RMA, or the county. And then additionally, certain lobbyists affiliated with TxDOT, the RMA, or the county are ineligible to serve. So the way that we manage conflicts for the RMA, one, Celia is going to provide you with an annual certificate at the end of the meeting, and that is a chance for you to sign off on your qualifications to serve as a director. So it'll have affirmative statements that you meet any of those thresholds that we just discussed, and there's some additional ones we'll go through later, but it lays all of those out, and we do that each year. And then additionally, the state provides a disclosure form to manage ordinary conflicts that might arise. So for most conflicts, disclosure and recusal is sufficient, but I'll remind you that recusal extends beyond voting. You need to recuse yourself from any discussion on a matter where you have a conflict. All right, bribery and gifts. This slide outlines the 4 elements of bribery, accepting a benefit in exchange for a decision, recommendation, or vote. But I want to make a note on the timing as the 4th element. An item can be accepted after the exercise of an official action and still be considered a bribe. So the state provides certain exceptions to the bribery statute, and you see those in the blue boxes here. TxDOT has made some clarifications within their rules and guidelines that would put certain gifts, um, it doesn't turn them into a bribe, but there are certain gifts that you might think this is fine, it doesn't trigger the bribery rules, but it would still trigger a violation of the TxDOT guidelines. So for example, non-cash items are typically not considered bribery under state law. TxDOT just puts a very small threshold on that. You can have a token item, but not valued at more than $25. Food, lodging, and transportation is not considered an act of bribery under state law. TxDOT only allows reimbursement for food travel to an official event. And then you can have an honorarium in the form of a meal served at that event, but not any type of check or other big gift. All right, on use of government property. For the staff, it's more broad because they've got access to computers and additional government property. But for the board members, the only government property that you really have access to in this capacity is information. And so we just ask you to be mindful with the information that you receive in your capacity as a board member that might not otherwise be publicly available because that could be misused.
How would you define something information that's not in the public domain?
Well, certainly things that we talk about in executive session, you may have information not on any of our current projects in the future on specific right-of-way that we might be looking at for a future project. That would be something that you wouldn't want to reveal to the public. One, it would impact the price of the land potentially, but it could also create speculators, coming into buying adjacent land. So that would be the most likely situation. I guess you might have information on litigation or other pending matters with the RMA that you'd want to keep confidential.
Would most of that type of information be covered under executive session?
Right. And executive session also prohibits you from releasing the information you're given there.
Anything outside the executive session forum?
I can't think of anything that you would have access to outside of executive session.
So executive session discussions would be a very good guideline for us on public information or non-public information.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a good guideline.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, nepotism. Here's a great chart on the complications of determining where nepotism falls. But for you, it's pretty easy because you only hire one employee, and that's the executive director. So you just want to make sure that when you hire an executive director for the RMA, no one's related to him by blood or marriage. All right, the next section is open government, and you've all got your open meetings and Public Information Act training. So I'm going to be brief with this section, but if you've got questions, please just slow me down and we'll go through those. So with regard to open meetings, you're a governmental body, and so your meetings need to be posted. The agenda needs to be provided in advance. We only talk about items on the agenda, and the records of the meetings must be maintained. For the most part, the staff manages all of this for you. But at the end of the day, the duty to have an open meeting belongs to the board members. And so that duty lands with you to make sure that you're not discussing items off the agenda, that you don't take things into executive session that haven't been posted for executive session, and that you don't hold a meeting that hasn't been properly noticed. All right, a public meeting is defined as any time you've got a quorum discussing the official business. So in this situation, 4 board members makes a quorum, and discussion of the RMA's business would be triggered by anything that you might vote on in the future. And so you want to be very mindful of violating the open government guidelines. There are some things that we know are not considered public meetings. And so there may be more than 4 of you at a social setting, at a convention or symposium, the TxDOT forum, Chamber of Commerce events, things like that. And as long as you're not discussing RMA business and no deliberation towards action is taken at those events, those are fine. What's most confusing about open meetings is the walking quorums. And so that's where groups of board members might what it says here, knowingly conspire to circumvent the act by meeting in numbers of less than a quorum for purposes of secret deliberations. That sounds very nefarious. It can happen by email. One of you sends an email to two, and then that email gets sent to another one. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a discussion that involves 4 board members. And so you want to be careful about that. There's some confusion in this area because there was a 2018 court case that pretty much invalidated this question of walking quorums. The legislature responded by making it very clear. And so you can see the language in the blue box here. That if you know at the time that you're meeting in these smaller groups or you're corresponding in these smaller groups, that would help break the quorum, then that can constitute a deliberation and a violation of the act. All right, you've got some exceptions to your open meetings requirements, and that's when we go into executive session. And I've got the specific items that the statute provides that gives us permission to go into executive session. For our purposes, it's generally consultation with an attorney, a little bit of real property, and we've gone in on personnel issues. But we can't just go in to discuss anything. It has to be something that's provided in this list. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the Open Meetings Act is the responsibility of the official. And so it's a misdemeanor offense if there's a violation of this act. So this is an important one for you to pay close attention to. All right, public information. The information that the RMA creates all belongs to the public. There are certain exceptions that we don't have to release preliminary information or attorney-client communications, certain third-party information out. But as a general rule, we think of the items that you're creating with the public dollars belong to the public. The one new piece that came from this last session that impacts, I think, this entire presentation, this is the only one, deals with suspending the Public Information Act during a catastrophe. And so this is kind of deep in the weeds, but you can suspend your response to public requests for information during a catastrophe. And the legislature has laid out some pretty detailed rules on how long and how many times you can set those delays in place. So with regard to the public information component, your responsibility is to complete your training. You want to be careful and avoid using your personal devices and email accounts when conducting RMA business, because your participation in that business is part of the public record. If you do receive information on your personal email or your phone, you want to forward them to a server that the RMA maintains so that record is preserved. You should assume all communication regarding the RMA is public. If you get a request for public information, you want to let the staff know. And then, of course, you want to be careful about ever deleting or destroying records, particularly if we've got an Information Act pending or a litigation hold. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question, just for my own
Yeah.
benefit. How many requests do we get annually, or do we get
What do you, like
more than
three,
one, a whole
three or
bunch?
four maybe a year? Yeah, probably 3 to 7 a year. And, the state law says you respond expeditiously, not to wait to the end of the deadline. And this team has always been super committed to that. We get a request in and we try to respond very quickly. A lot of times we put the information up on the website so that if one person's asking for it, it becomes open to others. But we don't get too many.
Let me see if I'm interpreting this. If you put number 2 and number 3 together, you're saying on personal devices such as mobile phones
Mm-hmm.
while in session, if we get an email or a text, is that become public information?
Just because you're here,
Yes, ma'am?
your wife texts you?
Yes.
No, that's a good question, but that doesn't change the nature of it. It's just information that relates to the RMA. And so the best practice is if you get something, if somebody emails you
That's not what
something.
it says here, though. There's no condition or
What's that?
restrictions on information received in reference to our RMA. It just says general information. Personal devices and email accounts conducting RMA business, that we have to forward that.
Right.
If it's on a personal account, back to the RMA.
RMA server. So those are together. So if you're using a personal device, if Forrest emails you something from the meeting that you lost that you wanted, and he sends it to your personal account, your personal email address, you want to go ahead and forward that to your
Okay.
RMA account so that the record becomes preserved.
I see.
Or if a vendor sends you something and says, you
Like
should-
if we're in session and the vendor sends us something?
yes, but not just in session. You could be on vacation and a vendor sends you something that says, hey, I hope you'll consider my great construction firm because we do these things. You want to forward that on to your RMA account so that you're preserving a record in case we ever need it.
Why would that be public information if we're doing something on our personal time?
If it relates to the RMA business,
Yes, ma'am.
then that's what makes it public information.
What's the difference between that and if a vendor comes over and talks to us or wants
Well,
to talk to us?
Because the Public Information Act deals with records
Okay.
that exist. And so we don't have to create records. I don't have to go get a statement from you on that conversation. I don't have to create a record if somebody requests something, but I do, if I have a record, then we have to make that available.
And just to go to the next step, a record would be what? Something that we could forward? What is
Yeah.
a record?
A record is,
I'm sorry, Blakely.
no, it's okay. It's correspondence. It could be a report. It could be
Anything that we could forward to anybody else would be a record document, anything else?
right. The courts have found that text messages are
Oh,
considered records.
Okay.
I haven't seen voicemail, but I would think that if a text message qualifies, a voicemail would as well.
So anything printed, recorded that has to do with the RMA, we need to forward it back to the director?
Well, or you have an RMA account, you can just forward it onto your own RMA email address. And then
Okay.
your record just lives there. And it's probably completely insignificant and, it would just sit there. But in the event that we need to recreate the records for a request or for some other reason, litigation or something else, we need to make sure they haven't been destroyed. And that's the best way.
Okay, I see that.
And also, on a request,
So like.
you don't want
like-
us to have to go through
like
your
in
phone to
Like
find
in
our
litigation, we
documents.
as lawyers request information from the other side. So in any emails or anything like that, they have to produce to us. So that's why we have to preserve that record.
Right,
Okay.
right. And if you keep it on your RMA account, then it means we don't have to go through your personal phone to find these records later,
Okay.
right?
Thanks.
Yes. Okay. Number 6 on public information, this relates to employees. But and this reiterates what applies to the directors, that employees need to also, they're considered temporary custodians of the government's records, and they need to be sure to forward information on and keep everything on the RMA server. All right, the compliance program, that's what we're doing today. Under TxDOT's rules, RMAs are required to adopt and enforce an internal ethics and compliance program. You've got to have high-level personnel responsible for oversight of the program. In this case, Pharr and Celia manage the program. They're not allowed to delegate substantial discretionary authority to individuals who might have a propensity to engage in illegal activities. And we provide the annual periodic training to employees and the board of directors. We also communicate with the agents and with our vendors that we anticipate that they should have an internal ethics and compliance program as well. So state law requires that we have an anonymous reporting capability. And so that's on the website. You can see the little button on slide 31 that says fraud reporting. If somebody reports something on that link, it goes to the senior staff and then it also comes to me. So it's coming in 2 different directions. All right, you are required to have a written code of conduct that addresses these items here. You do have this code of conduct. I think you approved it maybe 2 years ago. It's available on the website, and then the staff all has a copy. This is really more applicable to the staff, but it goes through these specific items that TxDOT requires. And then every year we're required to make an annual certification to TxDOT that certain things have been achieved. One, that you've got your ethics and compliance program in place, that you've got your anonymous reporting mechanism in place, that the RMA is working to enforce compliance with its program, and that the program satisfies the requirements that are listed there below. You have been, and then you got a very nice letter afterwards that this RMA follows the rules very well. All right, so the training evidence that is part of our program, all of you have your open meetings training certificates and your Public Information Act training certificates. Tonight, you will get your annual compliance certificate to sign. The staff, and it's just the staff, right, that does the Investment Training Act? Right. And then the staff also does some special TxDOT training that's required with regard to projects and billing. And then the reports here, these are things that you see throughout the year. They don't all come up at the same time, but these are statutorily required reporting documents for the RMA, your strategic plan, your annual report, financial reports, and your audit. You have to provide investment reports, project reports, notice of debt to the county. We do this compliance report. There's post-issuance compliance reports. And then as board members, you file your annual personal financial statements. So there is a very detailed ethics and compliance handbook on the website. If you ever have questions or you want to dive in more deeply to any of these topics, you can see the table of contents there. And we update that periodically, but it provides all of the information from the Attorney General's office, from the Ethics Commission, and from TxDOT, and all of the code and administrative rules are all provided there. And if there's questions, I'm happy to answer those. Yep. Okay, thanks.
Vice Chair, need to call the regular meeting to order and establish quorum. Yes, sir.
Help us to remember that we are doing your work and not our own. May we see this meeting as a time of serving just a name.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you hear
Vice Chairman, I think just need to confirm you have a quorum with Director Cantu. Are you still on the line?
Alonso?
Hello?
Are you
Yes,
still-
here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Director Cantu. Yeah, Vice Chair, you have a quorum. So, no, sir, we do not have anybody signed up for public comment.
First item is Eric with the
Yes.
program management reports,
Ye-
365.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. So we'll skip right to slide number 6, actually, yeah, 6 on your handbook. This is an evolving schedule, but we essentially received confirmation that the project development agreement, actually the financial assistance agreement for the gap funding is on the draft agenda for the June 30th Texas Transportation Commission meeting next week. So what that does is that it essentially solidifies this project schedule to try to get to a letting somewhere mid-September. Uh, Long story short is that we would work, very diligently with the local Pharr district to get our release to advertise next month. Very aggressive, but we're trying to work against some of the time that we've lost here in the interim, and with possible rate hikes. That's really largely what drives this version of the schedule. Essentially, we would want to advertise. We still want to hold the 60-day advertisement period, so that we give the contracting community and suppliers ample time to sharpen the pencil and give as realistic a bid as they can on this project. So we hold the 60 days, open bids, the September the 17th, according to this schedule, which gives staff some time to do some of the vetting on the responsive and responsible, low bidder, to make sure that we have a bidder that shows all the pedigree, has checked all the boxes, and that we have a true bid on our hands. Do some essentially some mathematical analysis of the bid to make sure it's not unbalanced. A lot of checks that we have to show up for the state and for federal funding purposes that we have to run the traps on. It also gives us time to review the contract internally, and then bring that to the board, hopefully by the end of September, for an approval for an award of contract. And so what that does is that it declares the low bidder as the awardee, as the responsive and responsible low bidder, which is a requirement for federal funding of this type. And then that would set off a process, which Richard will elaborate on here in a few minutes, that includes, visiting rating agencies, publishing the preliminary official statement, pricing bonds, and closing those bonds, which in essence really culminates in a commencement of construction January of 2022. So if we start basically next week, we can have a project turning dirt January of next year. So this is allotting for all of the federal requirements for, advertisement periods, for review periods, time to go to the market, and to, give everybody ample time during holiday periods in between to assure that this project can be successful. So are there any questions on 365 at this time?
How comfortable do you feel with this schedule? Is this a real schedule?
It is very real. We discussed this with TxDOT administration, essentially the finance team. Our GEC took a look at it. And so we did a lot for, ample time in between. The good thing about this project is that because the gap funding is being made available for it, it essentially leaves the bid documents the same. In other words, the plans don't have to be necessarily revised. The bid items are the same. The GEC just came back last month and verified that, everything is holding pretty well on the check that they did. So, we're going in with a certain comfort level with the contract documents, but they're also not changing a whole lot. And whatever changes did happen in the bid documents, they've already been somewhat vetted through TxDOT when we did the 2017 bid, and did those change orders, change of contract documents to include things like value engineering change proposals. So the one change that changes from the 2017 bid to now is the inclusion of that element in the bid document, but that's already been vetted by TxDOT, the feds, obviously our legal counsel, and everybody in between. So we feel fairly confident we can hold the schedule as long as we could all, work toward that same goal, which is why we've been sharing the schedule with our internal Pharr district, stakeholders. We have a meeting with them on Friday to basically initiate the kickoff on this schedule. And RMA staff is ready to meet, is ready to meet, all these milestones.
In your roundtabling of this schedule, have you discussed, reviewed any pitfalls that possibly could impact this schedule? And if so, are you in a position to advise us of what those may be?
The biggest risk is going to be price hikes. So in the timing of the market. And so essentially we're doing everything within our power within this form of the schedule to get ahead of that. Should there be more time needed to be allotted, we did add for a buffer at the end of this schedule to essentially get documented and all of our documentation with TxDOT for the.
Are you referring to a time buffer?
Yeah, so
Okay.
essentially we gave ourselves in the schedule, and TxDOT agreed to it, about 4 months behind this December execution of contract, essentially, that we have in the schedule, to go all the way through May of next year to basically get into contract and get the project rolling. So we did add a buffer of time. So should the holidays present, some extension of time, or something happened with the bid and we have to take it some additional time, for instance, for the unforeseen, we have some additional time baked in. Yes.
So Director, in my opinion, probably the biggest time delays will be if we have a hiccup with TxDOT or with the Federal Highway Administration, which is, they're involved in this process, giving us some approvals along the way. And so if they get delayed for whatever reason, then we have that additional time built in. But we're confident that on our side, we'll deliver our financial advisor, our internal staff, our general engineering consultant, we can deliver that time schedule. It's the external component, which is TxDOT and FHWA, that could present a time delay.
Anything that may be foreseen?
At this point, we don't foresee anything. We've vetted that pretty heavily, and Eric mentioned that not only the local TxDOT staff, but we've been vetting this with the Austin staff, which is really where the ultimate approval comes from. And so far, they have not sent back anything that they see as fatal with the schedule we've presented.
Thank you.
Any other questions on 365? Hearing none, I'll go to IBTC just very shortly. We're still wrapping up the environmental document on that. We do have an item here on the agenda for this month to activate HDR GEC for some design support that we need to round out the schematic comments that we have on the environmental document. Essentially, environmental clearance, and that doesn't just include the studies that we've been working very diligently on the last 2.5 years, but it also includes getting a 30% design vetted and approved by TxDOT. So we receive comments to our 90% submittal, and this allows the HDR to come on board to essentially pick up the project, deliver on all the technical requirements for the approval of said schematic, and also line it up so that we're ready to take this to PSNE after environmental clearance. So the work is somewhat twofold. It's not just wrapping up what we have for environmental right now, but it's setting the stage for the future design that has to be done by external engineering contractors that'll come to deliver the design at the appropriate time. But right now, since time is of the essence to include some additional guidance that we have received on our environmental document, we have to engage the GEC now to get that across the goal line and get it ready for the future. So the work is, like I said, twofold and critical, not just to the short term, but helps to set up the long term, perspective that we have to get this project, fully developed and delivered. So, any questions on IBTC?
Yes, I do have a question, and I need to make sure that I'm in line here with the agenda. It seems like these projects take a long time, okay?
That is true.
It just seems like they take a long time. Is there, I'm coming in from Weslaco, and it's because of the construction, but even when there's no construction, there's an incredible amount of traffic. What can you tell me, or can we start working, or is there a report on SH 68?
So State
I
Highway
mean, it
60
just seems to be sitting there and we never talk about it. And it seems to me that perhaps 365 and IBTC are really important. We have 150,000 vehicles on the expressway. And the north side of Hidalgo County has grown exponentially. And we get a lot of traffic coming in from the Cameron County also on the expressway that head north. Am I wrong to say, when can we start discussing SH 68?
So let me comment on that, Director. So State Highway 68 was originally our segment segment D, and then TxDOT took it over. And so TxDOT right now, they're mired down in the environmental clearance process for that project. They were supposed to be environmentally clear probably a year ago. And then they've gotten delayed. And I really don't know why they've gotten delayed. They had a public hearing scheduled, and then that date kind of came and went, and it didn't materialize. But when TxDOT started that process, they notified us that they would be under construction before 365 or IBTC was environmentally clear. We actually lapped them with the 365 project and the environmental clearance process, and we're going to construction. And we're actually neck and neck with them to environmentally clear IBTC versus State Highway 68. So my point to all that is that the regional mobility authorities were created so they could expedite projects. And I think we're showing that we can deliver a project faster than TxDOT can. Granted, they're complex projects. They have a lot of issues. That one is a little bit bigger, a little bit longer environmental footprint that they have to clear, and they're going through some pretty sensitive areas that they're having to deal with. But
Is this totally TxDOT, or are we doing jointly, or do we have any
totally
involvement in it?
TxDOT, totally TxDOT,
Totally?
totally
Yes.
TxDOT.
Non-toll, correct?
Non-tolled, yeah. And I remember the district engineer at the time, we met with him, and he told us, oh, we'll be done with this project before you guys even get started. And the opposite's happening. So
Well, obviously, there may not be any political incentive for
Yeah.
them to do SH 68. And do we have a responsibility to move politically or otherwise as TxDOT to move on 68? As a body, as an authority?
I think as a body, you can encourage them to expedite the project. We can, pass a resolution supporting the project, asking them to accelerate the project. So I believe you can.
I don't want to take you offline, I'm sorry, but I'm just sitting here and it takes me a long time to get here. As you all know, the last two times I was very late.
Yes, sir.
So it just seems to me that 68 is so important, as is the other ones that
It
we're
is.
working on.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe if I can, and I don't want to be on the line for us, but if you can look into it, or we can start making some movement
sir.
in that direction, whether it's just a resolution at the beginning or something along that line.
Maybe an update.
I was gonna say a
Yeah,
presentation.
so we've got a meeting scheduled Friday at 10 p.m. with the district office, and we'll ask them to
Maybe have the
give us a
district
status
engineer
on
provide-
68.
Okay.
I mean, 10 a.m. I'm sorry, not 10 p.m., 10 a.m.
Thank you.
I'm going to be the only one showing up to that one, right? So,
I'll be there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on IBTC or anything else related to projects? No? Thank you all.
Well, let me ask you, following it up, if you have more traffic on IBTC, where do you think it's gonna go?
So if you have more traffic on IBTC, I guess it all depends on what's driving it. So you've got the Donna International Bridge that's opening up for truck traffic.
Yeah.
So let's say, right, crystal ball, that happens a lot sooner than later. Then a lot of it is probably going to be northbound traffic.
So where's it gonna go?
It's going to probably end up going to the expressway or to points west, hopefully utilizing the 365 project.
And if
Um,
we already have a bottleneck on the expressway, and you're gonna put in more traffic on there,
Which is the reason why we wanted to have the IBTC done and essentially dovetail into wherever it was that State Highway 68 was going to land. That is to say, State Highway 68 and
but if we don't have
IBTC.
Highway 68, where's it gonna go?
Correct. So the idea is that, given the latest alignments that they've landed on in the environmental document with where we've landed in our independent environmental document, there's the opportunity there for some cooperation in the future to essentially connect up the two projects. So perhaps, when TxDOT comes and does their update, that could be one of the questions that's floated is, what does the future look like in terms of collaboration and connecting? Because until you connect IBTC to something northbound, then that's when you can start alleviating the Interstate 2
Yeah.
traffic.
So Director, the short-term answer is they'll go to Interstate 2, they'll head west and go to I-69 Central, or they'll go east and head to I-69 East, 77 and 281. Those are the only two outlets for them to go to, or three outlets to go. But one of the issues that our projects, IBTC, State 365, address is that a lot of that truck traffic is already utilizing local roadway networks. They're going down Stewart Road, they're going down Veterans, they're going down.
I
King.
understand that, but isn't that the point that we want to get them off of those
Yes,
roads?
and so in the short term, we'll get a lot of that truck traffic that's using the local network, which is not designed for truck traffics and having to go through residential and school zones and commercial areas.
When was the last time that we made a study for traffic movement? This authority, when was the last time we did that?
So as part of our investment grade traffic and revenue study,
So
that looks
December
at,
was the latest?
yeah, December of 2020, and that looks at origin and destination. Where are they coming from and where are they going? So we have a lot of that data. We know where they're coming from and we
Do
know
we
where they're
know the
going.
traffic that's gonna be onto IBTC, where it's gonna be going?
I'm sorry, Director?
The IBTC traffic, do we know now?
Yes, we
Where
we
it's gonna
know.
be going?
Yeah, we know where it's gonna be going, yes. And a lot of that traffic is, some of it's going to local destination points, because the studies show that a lot
When you
of
say
it,
a lot, is that 20% or 50% or 70%?
I
If
I
you
don't,
know,
I
if
don't
you don't
have
know,
the,
that's okay.
I don't have the split on the top of my head, but I'm gonna say the majority is going to a local destination, but a portion of it is going to and through the county and going to places north of our county.
Can you share that information with
Yes,
us?
sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Did you say dirt? Did you say dirt project? What does that
Third,
mean?
third project.
The
Oh,
connection
third.
between,
I thought you said
IBTC,
dirt. I'm sorry.
So,
Okay,
so
third project.
basically an interchange at,
Between what and what?
an interchange at the Interstate 2, IBTC, and State Highway 68 juncture. There's going to be, that's what Ramon is referring to. There's going to have to be an interchange comparable to the Pharr interchange at that location,
to the new fire energy.
to the new Pharr interchange.
Nice
Yes.
and wide, double,
Well,
double lane.
yeah, but that interchange is just gonna get it onto the interstate. That's all it's gonna do, right?
No, it would actually also connect to go up and over. So unlike,
up and over where?
unlike the one that we have now, that
Up and
just
over where?
up and over Interstate 2. So it allows traffic to go north from IBTC, go north onto State Highway 68, and then hit points north. Avoid the interchange. And I can give you, when I give you the information, I can diagram what that project would look like. But
But there's no Highway 68 right now. It's just a small little road.
right, and that's what we're alluding to, that you have to have State
Nobody's
Highway
gonna go,
68
no
done.
trucks are gonna get onto that road. They're gonna go onto 281,
For now, yes.
Interstate 2.
Right. But I think the way both schedules are working, for instance, it's taken longer for State Highway 68, but at the same time, IBTC has yet to achieve construction funding. Probably by the time it does, we'll
I'm
probably have,
just saying because these things take forever.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get through with IBTC, there's gonna be a quagmire there if we don't do anything with 68.
that's exactly why we're trying to develop the IBTC as quickly as possible to bring these conversations forward so we can get them all connected
Yeah.
up the right way.
So one of the things that the board has approved, and I don't remember if it was prior to your tenure on the board, Director, but we're going to flip IBTC over to TxDOT, and we've already submitted that request to put it on the state highway system so that it has connectivity to the interstate, because there's an interchange that's still needed, and connectivity to State Highway 68.
That'll
were-
open some eyes. Yeah.
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, that'll open some eyes, because
Yeah.
now you have two state systems that need
You're
to
gonna
be.
have a dead end there or
Right.
the interstate. That's all you're gonna do. And put more cars and vehicles, trucks on the interstate.
Right.
That's all you're gonna do.
Right,
It already has a lot as it is. So you can look for 5, 6, 7 years down the road.
correct. And so that should help accelerate. Now we have two state systems that connect to an interstate system, and so that should give it.
That makes a lot of sense, Pilar.
Yeah.
I like that kind of
Yeah.
thinking. So I think what I'm asking is if we can start moving forward, even if we don't do it, at least let's get the state to start thinking about moving
sir.
it.
Correct. And that's why we're working as fast as we can to finish the environmental clearance, because that in effect pretty much sets the
It-
right of way footprint, and it sets a lot of that in motion.
It kind of forces them to, okay, now you can build it. Is basically the position it puts it in. Get some construction dollars lined up.
I
and you can
know
build
that
it.
I'm a little older, but there was a time when there was no interstate, even during my lifetime.
You're not that old.
Yes, I am. But I'm telling you that the, the whole Rio Grande Valley has grown a lot.
Yeah.
And in all perspective, it's gonna continue to grow.
It is.
And I think we need that 68 as much as we need the other ones.
We need them all. That's
Yes,
for
sir.
sure.
We agree.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Vice Chairman, Directors, next item on your agenda is a report on the 365 tollway project financing activities, and Richard Ramirez from Hilltop Securities. We gave you a separate handout. It looks like this, 2-pager. This is the schedule and detail that Richard's going to review with you.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Vice Chairman, board members, good evening. I have placed before you is a schedule, a document that we provided to TxDOT. We've been having conversations with them and question and answers, and we had an hour-long conference call yesterday. The staff is getting ready to do briefings tomorrow with the commissioners. And so for the item that's on the agenda on the 30th commissioners meeting that's upcoming. So their questions were related. They've seen the base case where we've provided the numbers that you've also seen, but then they wanted us to go steps further, and which we do anyway, but they wanted to see for themselves what the financing looked like under different scenarios. And so I'm not going to go through all the details here, but I'm going to try to tell you what basically we're doing is that we took that base case, assuming today's current rates and assuming the traffic and revenue that's provided by the TNR consultant, and taken the cost provided by the engineering staff. And so we basically model out the financing. What we've done is added, in addition to today's rates, we added 50 basis points to the rates, and did modeled out what it would look like, which shows that we would be able to finance a project without any problem if rates go up by 50 basis points. That's the first column, scenario one. Scenario two is what happens if then the bid comes in $45 million higher than we anticipate, plus the 50 basis points in increase in rates. And so we show the results, a summary of the results here, that coverages and what we would have to do, basically the structure of the financing, which still shows it that we were still able to do that, to execute the financing given those constraints. And then lastly, they wanted to see, well, what happens, what if rates go up by 200 basis points, which is 2%, which is really, really highly unlikely, I think, if we execute the financing when we anticipate doing it, and the schedule, which I'll discuss in a minute. So that's kind of what we did, and this is what we provided to them. And it shows, when you show coverage and we anticipate ratings and so forth, this is things that we assume in the model. That's what the rates we assume are based on certain ratings that we'll have to go to the rating agencies and obtain. But based on the experiences of other toll roads that we financed, this is kind of where we think that we would fall out in terms of investment grade ratings for the project. And then just looking at coverage, to explain coverage and maybe understand, but I don't want to assume too much, is that how much is revenue above and beyond the net revenue after expenses and maintenance, how much are you covering the debt service? So when we say 1.7 or 3 times, that means your revenue is 3 times over your debt service payment, your net revenues. And then the structure, we break out the financing between what we call senior lien bonds. Those are rated higher, and then a subordinate lien. And we have a subordinate lien to create more capacity. So I don't mean to get into a whole lot of detail, but I just kind of wanted to show you some of the things that we have been doing in interacting with TxDOT. And I'm happy to answer questions on this document. Like I said, I just don't want to, we could spend a whole lot of time going through a lot of detail here, but I'll leave it up to you. We also have been talking, they also were very interested in the financing schedule. The second page is taking from Eric's schedule that he provided in terms of board approval of a contract on September 28th. 2 days later, we would meet with a rating agency. Since we already know what the bid amount is, we would prepare the documents. and go to the rating agencies on September the 30th. We anticipate, because it's project financing, that would need a couple of weeks to evaluate and receive the ratings on the 14th of October. We would post the offering document. The POS is a preliminary official statement on October the 15th. And then we would, you have to allow some time for marketing of the bonds and talking to investors and so forth. So then we would price the bonds, sell bonds on the 26th, and then close, have a financial closing on the December 1. Once you price on the 26th of October, you have set the rates. That's when you are confirmed in terms of what your interest rate is going to be. The reason you have time between pricing and closing is finalizing documents, and then we also have to obtain on every bond issue in the state the Attorney General's approval, and that also takes takes at least 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. So we feel like this schedule is very feasible from our standpoint, assuming everything else falls in place with regard to contract approvals and so forth. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
$45 million additional capacity. Where'd you come up with that number? Why'd you-
We increased the rates and we set the coverage where we think we could get an investment grade of 1.75. So we came up with the additional capacity. I think 45 is sort of the minimum.
As a percent of sales, what is there? As a percent of cost, what is that? roughly?
At 45 as a percent of the contract.
15, 16%?
I think it's
Yeah,
pretty
it'd
high.
be
It's much higher.
45 out of 255 million, whatever that ratio is.
And you use 40, and you use 45 because you say that that could be the highest?
No, assuming if rates, we also added 50 basis points,
Right.
0.5% a rate.
Right.
If we have the same rates today that it's not inconceivable, we could be in the same rate environment by the end of the year. Then that goes up to probably 70, 75 million. So
So
there's
that's,
variables to that. That's kind of a rough estimate. It's not exact, but approximately.
so that's approximately 18% additional capacity compared to the project budget or project estimate, I should say. All
I'm
right.
sorry, but you use the word roughly and then you use the word approximate.
Well, I just did a quick.
That's what Richard did.
Yeah.
Well, what is it? Is it pretty accurate? I mean, is it?
The 45 million?
Yes,
No,
sir.
there's variables to that. We
Okay.
think that that's a good number.
That is a good number.
If it comes in at that amount higher, we're sure we're good. It could
Which
even
is
be 50 or,
15 to 18%.
Which is about right.
Plus
Yeah.
bid,
Okay.
right? So-
well, what we did is we showed the results if it was that number, and it works at that number.
Well,
Okay.
plus our estimate, what we think the bid will. or
Yeah.
should
Come up.
be,
We don't know.
which-
Yeah, so if we come in at 300 million, we could cover a $300 million bid is what it boils down to.
20 cents a mile is the toll rate. Is that still the going rate?
Yes.
I don't, just, when the rates go up, what happens with those difference in funds? Is it accounted for in the long term when the toll rates go up?
But when toll rates go up,
Yes, sir.
they basically go to, pay debt service, and there's a waterfall. You have to meet all the expenses.
No, I understand that, but I'm sure that I just don't know because I've never seen it, that you accounted for those increase in rates in the future. So my question is, where did you put them or where is it on the formula?
They fall down to the bottom line. They go into, for instance,
I
Yeah.
understand they go to the bottom line. Are you saying that any rates would be over and above already at that point, 7, 8 years from now, towards the bottom line?
yes,
Okay. Everything else is constant, fixed?
the interest rates are fixed.
Okay.
Expenses are not. Obviously,
Yes,
they also go up. and
Everything,
so
some
forth.
of the other expenses could go up, but as far as the actual financing,
Yes,
okay.
it's fixed. Yeah, there's no variable bonds or anything in here.
Okay.
Mhm. All right, thank you very much.
Vice Chair and Directors, the next item on your agenda is a consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the governing body and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. However, if discussion is desired, that item or items will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately.
So moved. Alonso.
Here. Hello?
Sir, you need to mute your phone. You make a lot of noise.
I can't hear y'all.
Okay, Director, we're on consent agenda and they're calling for a vote to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion and a second.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. There we go. All
Next,
right,
next,
regular agenda.
yes, sir. Next item is item 3A, Resolution 2021-18, consideration and approval of the First Amendment of the Project Development and Operation and Maintenance Agreement between the Texas Department of Transportation and the Hidalgo County Regional Mobility Authority for the 365 Tollway Project. So in your packet, you have a copy of the amendment to the Project Development Agreement, which we currently have a Project Development Agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation. And basically the amendment, which is a very short amendment, it's just a 3-page amendment, is in your packet. But the most significant change to the amendment is that we will have to have the project under construction by May of 2022. May of 2022 is our drop dead date to have the project and contract extended. It was in 2016, I believe. Update the project development agreement. And that's the most significant amendment to the project because when we bid the project out the first time, we met our deadline. And so really the most significant change to this agreement is that our deadline has been moved forward to May of 2022.
Perfect.
Staff recommends approval.
So moved.
And a second? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. 3B,
Resolution 2021-21, approval of work authorization to the professional service agreement with HDR Engineering for the IBTC final schematic support for the environmental clearance. This is a work authorization in the amount of $197,746.02. Basically, we received all our comments back. We submitted our final environmental clearance document to the Texas Department of Transportation, and it went through all the reviews that it needed to go, and we received all of our comments back. And so there's items that we need to address, but the most significant item that we need to address is TxDOT wants us to provide a revised schematic for the project because they want us to include pedestrian and bike facilities on our high-speed truck traffic corridor. And they are mandating that we do that. And so that's what basically this work authorization entails is the bulk of it is to revise the schematic for the project to include pedestrian and bike facilities. So we don't have a choice. They're requiring us to do it. Staff recommends approval.
It is a requirement.
Yes, sir. Yes, I appealed it. I sent a letter and appealed it. Said, well, our project was already in progress before these requirements were. It's a new requirement, and they're requiring us to comply with them. Staff recommends approval.
get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do we need to reflect that Director Cantu is voting in favor as well? You can make
Yes,
note of
sir.
that. Okay,
Yes, sir.
item passed. 3C, Pilar.
Resolution 2021-22, approval of the contract amendment, contract amendment number 2 to the professional service agreement with HDR Engineering.
Increase the payable amount.
Yes,
has
sir.
To do with 3B. They
Right.
go hand in hand.
Correct. So that's, you approve the work. This one is to increase the maximum payable amount for the
All in
contracts.
favor?
So
Motion,
move.
Second.
Aye.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you.
Um,
So, what is it? 3C?
Three,
3D.
3D and 3E, we asked that you take no action. We were not able to have this item prepared. We're still in negotiations with the engineer.
All right. 3F.
3F, Resolution 2021-25, consideration and approval of work authorization number 4 to the professional service agreement with Signs Oil and Gas Service LLC for the Lone Star Pipeline relocation mitigation in the 365 Tollway project. So this is an 8-inch high-pressure gas line that's owned by Lone Star Pipeline Company, who has gone into bankruptcy. And so this is a compensable right-of-way. And so what that means is that this gas line existed before our project came along, and they are in their own right-of-way. So we're responsible for the relocation of that gas line 100%. What's complicated the issue is that Lone Star has gone into bankruptcy, and they're no longer able to do the engineering work or the construction work for that relocation. And so typically what we do is we enter into an agreement with them. They engineer it, they relocate it, and we reimburse them back. We're going to do this one a little bit differently. And so what they've agreed to allow us to do is we'll provide the engineering, and we'll hire the contractor to relocate the gas line, and then they'll accept the work. And so this is the first step to design the gas line
Who is
relocation.
they?
Lone Star
And they're in
Pipeline.
bankruptcy?
They're in bankruptcy. And Blakely can elaborate a little bit more
Blakely?
on that. So
They're in bankruptcy. Do we need consent from the court? Okay.
And you've been working on this for some period of time? I
yeah,
guess?
actually we've been trying to get this utility resolved for a long time, and because they've gone into bankruptcy, that's kind of complicated it on their end, not for us, on their end. And so we finally, this is the agreement we've hammered out. I think this is a much better scenario because we hire the consultant and we hire the contractor to relocate it, so we control that aspect. And so we need to redesign this gas pipeline and totally relocate it. It's approximately 400 feet, Ramon, that we're 600 feet of gas line that we're relocating. And Vice Chairman Reynolds was asking me about the procedure for relocating a gas line. So it's a little bit more than just cutting the line at both ends and lowering it. Actually, we have to they blow down the line. So all the gas that's in there, they've got to release all that gas to release the pressure, and that's product that costs money. And so guess we got to pay for all that product that's lost that they can't deliver anymore. And so that goes into the cost of all that reimbursement for the pipeline relocation. And that's a big cost we don't know what it's going to cost. They've given us an estimate, I believe, of about $1.4 million to relocate this gas line. So the first thing we're going to ask our engineer to do, who's on contract with us, is tell us if that estimate is realistic or accurate. But the work authorization is in the amount of $465,740.75. This is a specialty discipline. That's nothing that any of our civil group can handle. Oil and gas pipelines are regulated by the feds and by the state, and so it's a different set of rules and regulations that we're not well versed in. Staff recommends approval of the work authorization.
Get a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. That's it for regular agenda.
Let's see, we have the 3G, which is resolution 2021-26, which is the approval of the contract amendment for the maximum payable amount with Signs Oil and Gas. They're already in contract with us for other work.
We need a motion there too.
Yes, for 3G.
Motion in a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Oh, this is to pay them.
You approve the work authorization. This is to increase the contract amount.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. That's it. Excuse me.
Yep.
Nothing to report, I don't think. Did Chairman Deonda have anything he wanted you to go over?
No, sir, just that, the only thing that he had, asked me to report is that we did receive confirmation today. I forwarded that letter to you this morning from Chairman Bug that we will be on the agenda. So that was good news, to get actually a written confirmation. So
How
that,
about, executive session? Do we have anything we need to go into executive session?
so I don't know if we're gonna have a quorum to go into executive, Director Cantu, are you gonna be able to, dial into executive session?
He may have just hung up.
Yeah, so, yeah. Yeah, Director Cantu, are you gonna be able to, dial into executive session?
We can call him if he wants.
Yes,
We
and
can
we'll call you, sir.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, sir, Director Cantu. Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir, Director Cantu, this is Pilar. Will you be available for us to call you to go into executive session?
I'm in Brownsville right now, and I'm losing signal, so I see part of what you're saying.
Okay, we're gonna go into executive session and we will call you. Yes, we'll call you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
so recommend you entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
So move.
6A.
All in favor?
Aye. Is there anything that I need to sign?
Yes, we gotta sign some resolutions right now, especially the most important one is for the project development agreement.
Which one?
The PDA, the one you approved, because TxDOT wants that resolution tomorrow, so.
You want us to adjourn now?
Yes, sir. We have no further business for your consideration. So, And
Motion.
Move to adjourn. Aye.
Anything else? We good?
those are good. No further business for your consideration.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay.